Welcome back to the Roundtable. Welcome to the next edition of Under the Radar Review. I went back through my collection and I picked up an album I think is an underrated gem in this person's discography, and I'm going to go with A Little Ain't Enough from David Lee Roth. This is his third full length studio album, and it was produced by Bob Rock, who was one of the hottest producers at the time, sitting behind the boards of the breakthrough albums from The Cult, Motley Crue, Metallica, and Colin James. David Lee Roth reached out to him trying to get a big rock sound. He wanted to return to that after the release of Skyscraper. So if we go a little backwards, Eat 'Em and Smile, his first full-length studio album, was heralded as a classic by most rock fans and David Lee Roth fans. Skyscraper comes out, and he's going for that pop hit like they did with Jump. Not sure if it really worked that way. It was a solid seller, made it to over 1 million copies, but it did, I think, hurt his credibility. As I said in numerous other reviews, if you are a rock guy at that time in the 80s and 90s, if you were a rock guy, you don't dabble in pop, you don't do the rap, you don't do the reggae, you do the rock. So I think Skyscraper kind of slowed the momentum of his solo career. So by the time this came out, I think this was already facing an uphill battle. But the other things that this album was facing was, number one, it's 1991. People are looking for something different. 80s big rock sound was kind of waning. David Lee Roth's shtick was waning. People were looking for something else. And over the horizon, as we all know, in the 90s, grunge was about to emerge and take over the radio and video waves. So I think there was that hesitance to be fully immersed into this album. A lot of people just said, I had enough of the big 80s rock sound. I'm looking for something else. I like David Lee Roth, but I'm looking for something else. And understandably so. When David Lee Roth kind of was promoting this album, he said he went to Vancouver, went to the seediest hotels, like the early days in Van Halen, and he wanted to make a big, raw rock album. Yes, this is a rock album. I don't think it's very raw. It's very polished, but it doesn't take away from the enjoyment of it. But I think a lot of people were going like, "Oh, this is gonna be like Van Halen 1, or it's gonna sound like Mean Streets," and it dabbles in it, but it's not like fully immersed into that raw rock sound. It is still well produced 80s rock, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not, I think, the record that people were imagining. And again, in 91, people's tastes were changing. They were getting fed up of the big party rock albums. Needless to say, it was. I still enjoyed this. I think there's a lot to love on this album. I think the title track, "A Little Ain't Enough," is one of the closest things that David Art sounds like touching Van Halen. I think it's somewhat Van Halen esque. I like Lady Luck. It's written by Dio's very own Greg Goldie, and it's a great mid-tempo. I think this is the underrated classic track on here. This definitely needs to be released on a greatest hits package. I know they kind of put always at Showtime on David Lee Roth's greatest hits, but I think Lady Luck deserves to be heard for sure. Hammerhead Shark has great energy. I like Tell the Truth. It's a nice little bluesy number. Sensible Shoes is a great number. I love that song. And then the last two that were written by Jason Becker, who was supposed to be the next rock god, but unfortunately got Lou Gehrig's disease, and that kind of fell through, which is unfortunate because he's very, very talented. And the last two songs really have a great energy to them. And I think if he would have continued with Roth, I think his career would have been on a different trajectory altogether. And maybe we never would have seen a Van Halen reunion. I think with Becker on board, they were going for big things. And those two songs do touch on it. And you could see there's a magic with him and Roth. So overall, it's a great sounding album. Bob Rock behind the boards. It sounds big. It's not as raw as we hoped. So I think that's what hurt it again. And if you listen to the David Lee Roth discography, if you go from Eat 'Em a Smile to Skyscraper, there's something missing. Then it goes back to this. I think this should have been the follow-up to Eat 'Em a Smile. If this would have been the follow-up and came out a year before, like in 1988, 89, 90, this thing would have been a multi-platinum smash for sure. No doubt in my mind. So then with Skyscraper coming on board, people would have been, okay, he did back-to-back rock albums. Let's see what else he can do. I think they would have been more open to that pop craft of Skyscraper if this would have been the follow up to Eat 'em Smile. So I think the timing was off due to the musical landscape and when this came out and when it was placed in his discography. But overall, I still think it's a solid album. I still think Lady Luck is one of the best songs Roth has ever done. It's a mid tempo, but it kicks ass. Um, and deserves to be heard. I'm looking forward to the box set, see how the remastering is. This is the first album I'm gonna play actually. It is gonna be this one for sure. But that's my choice and my thing. You let me know. Has anybody heard this album? Do you have this album? Were you ever a David Lee Roth fan? Did you think he stumbled on this? I think it's still a great album on its own. No way a masterpiece as good as Eat 'em and Smile, but a solid album in its own right. But you let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this album. Share them with us. I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Hit the like button and subscribe. We really would appreciate it. This is Steven from the Aroundtable with my Under the Radar pick of the week. A little ain't enough. And I'll be seeing you soon, guys.